just going to share my slides. Hopefully you can now all see that. I now can't see you, so I'm just going to assume that you can. As Kate mentioned, my presentation is all about rapid improvement events and how we've used them at the University of Nottingham to make change happen. But just as an introduction to me, so Kate's already done a decent job of this, but I've worked at the university for 9 years and I've worked in higher education for 12. It's now actually 12 and a half and 9.5. And I am a senior lean practitioner within the Getting in Shape team, which is a lean team that works across the university with every department and every academic school. My particular focus is with the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences. So that includes four academic schools, which is medicine, health sciences, and then it also includes life sciences and the vet school as well. And it's actually the biggest faculty within the university. I'm also involved in university-wide initiatives as well. So as well as being partnered with a particular faculty, I work on things that cut across the university. And in my presentation today, I'm going to talk about two case studies, one from medicine and health sciences and one which is a university-wide initiative. So Nottingham is a large comprehensive university. So that means we deliver courses across pretty much every discipline that you could imagine. The only thing I've found that we don't really do, well, we don't do at all, is dentistry. But pretty much everything else we deliver here. We have about 45,000 students. The majority of those are here in the UK, but we've also got campuses in Malaysia and in China as well. But I'm just going to ask Susan to do this quick poll, and hopefully she'll be able to tell me the results of it as well. But I've got two questions for you. Number one, how embedded is continuous improvement or lean in your institutions? And have you ever had any success at running a rapid improvement event? So I'll just ask her to do that and hopefully we'll get some results come through. Okay.
They're coming in.
Yeah, I can see them. They're on my screen.
Oh, can you see them? Well, that's good.
Helpful. Thank you. I think there's a couple more people that we're just waiting for. But it's really helpful for me to get an idea of who I've got on the session today, so I can get a sense of where you're coming at in terms of the content. I would, for information, I would say that we have a few years of experience of using continuous improvement lean. So Getting in Shape as a concept has been around for about 2 years now, and we've had my manager has been doing lean here for about 9 years, but I would say it's really only in the last 18 months or so that it's really taken off. And I would say that we have had success with running rapid improvement events, otherwise I wouldn't be here talking to you about them. And I would also say that they are a recognised way of delivering change. So looks like we've got quite a nice split, and we've got some people who've never run one, which will be interesting. Okay, thank you very much. So let's move my slides on. So what is a rapid improvement event? Now, first and foremost, I don't know the nationalities of the colleagues on this particular session, but in the UK, there's a very well-known product called Ronseal, and their slogan is "It does exactly what it says on the tin." And I would say rapid improvement events, it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a mechanism for making change rapidly or improvements rapidly. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about. Now, first and foremost, it follows the PDCA cycle, which is used to deliver those improvements over a short timescale. So you don't have your maybe your traditional university way of delivering improvements, where you have a working group, you or committees, and these things sit and they take time. This is over the course of a week. You both identify and make the changes and the improvements that you want to make. Use a range of different lean tools. You pick the ones that are relevant to the subject that you're talking about. And most important, I would say, is that it's led by and inclusive of the people who are experiencing the problem that you're trying to solve. So it's not led by me as the lean person, it's led by the people who are in that particular team. So as I said, I'm going to give you 2 case studies, but just to give you kind of a general overview of what we would expect within a rapid improvement event. Really, it falls into three chunks of time. So there's the pre-event, then there's during the event, and then there's the post-event. So although the changes, etc., are all done during the event, there is some fairly significant pre-work that needs to happen. And I would say most of that is around gathering the current state. So you don't spend that time during the event. You don't go suddenly going, oh, we need to go and collect some data or do voice the customer, etc. You do all that before. You also need to make sure you've got the right people, so the key roles, and then finally deliver any training that you feel like you might need to. The training isn't long. We tend to cover it in about an hour and a half. Then during the event, that's when you do your analysis of the current state, you generate ideas, do your improvements, and then you report out and you celebrate. And this celebrate is really important. It is a celebration. And then afterwards, inevitably, there will be things that you've not managed to complete as part of your event. So you would make sure that they're signed out, bit of communication, and then we moved into the control phase as well. So in terms of the 2 case studies that I'm talking about, the first case study is the lighter blue on, well, it's on my left, I assume it's your left too, and then the second case study is the darker blue on the right. And in the UK, we had our lockdown, the first lockdown was in March 2020. And at that point, I would say that Getting in Shape had very little penetration into any of the different schools or faculties or professional services. We were a relatively new team and no one really knew what to make of us. But in some ways, I would say that the pandemic has been a really positive thing for us as a team, because it's created endless problems that people needed help with, and we were seen as people who could help them solve those problems. So it was actually the School of Health Sciences that contacted my manager, and then it came through to me. And basically they were saying, help, we've got a problem. And their problem was exacerbated by the fact that it was the School of Health Sciences, where you train nurses, midwives and physios, and so they have been really hit hard by the pandemic. So we started talking to them. At that point, I hadn't spoken to them about a rapid improvement event, and they didn't know anything about it. But I started talking to them, started trying to understand their problem, and then importantly, started gathering some data, which I then presented back. And it was at that point I said, you know what, this is really something that maybe it would lend itself to a rapid improvement event. And that's because it was a school-wide problem. And I would say that they were relatively nonplussed by the idea, kind of a bit ambivalent. But I kept chipping away, did a bit of further engagement, and in the end I went, you know what, you're right, Luke, let's go for it. So we held our first rapid improvement event in August last year, which was perceived as a success. I would say it was a success as well. And then following that, I was almost wheeled out to various different people to talk to them about the rapid improvement event. And it was really seen as being a successful way of delivering the change. It then got the attention of our most senior PGR, so postgraduate researcher lead. And fortunately, I was already working with her, so I was able to talk to her about it. And she was like, oh, let's do one for the work that we're doing as well. I was like, okay, we can do one for that. So we then took the idea to the PGR steering group, which then led to our second rapid improvement event, which was held in November last year. So we're just coming up to the anniversary of that one. Now, when I first started talking about rapid improvement events, I would say that the awareness was really, really low. So that's the blue line. And so it was all about getting that engagement with those people early on. And so you can see the orange line, which is how much engagement I'm putting in, how much effort I'm having to put in, versus the blue line, which is how aware they were of the concept. And if I just click through, so that was March last year. Then in August, my engagement was probably at its maximum. I was talking to health sciences daily about what was going to happen. And then the awareness of the concept had really gone up as well. I would say it then dropped a little bit, but obviously I was still talking to PGR lead, and I would say that the awareness then went up again, because when we did the PGR rapid improvement event, that was university-wide, and so it really bumped up that awareness. And at that point, I was having to put in a lot less effort to get people to engage with the idea, because it was already seen as being successful. So that's where we are now. Bit less effort, bit more effort sometimes, kind of ups and downs, and the awareness of the concept has kind of stayed high. So my first case study, I've already mentioned this briefly. So it was the School of Health Sciences, and historically it didn't used to be one school, it used to be multiple schools, and then a few years back it all got bundled together into one school that was delivering kind of the healthcare teaching and research that we do within the university. And that had meant that it ended up with 3 divisions. So you had the division of midwifery, the division of physiotherapy and sports rehabilitation, mouthful, and then the division of nursing. And the division of nursing was probably 3 times as large as the other 2 divisions. And what this had meant was that within our school structures within the university, we have certain roles that have to be there. So we have to have a disability liaison officer for each school. But within health sciences, because they were by division, and each division operated in its own kind of silo, they were triplicating that role. So it could have been one person doing it across the whole school, but instead it was triplicated. And I would say triplicated was at best. It wasn't. And sometimes it was significantly more. And I've got a slide on what that looked like in a minute. Now, this was a problem that they've been trying to solve for 4 years, but had never managed to get any kind of agreement within the school as to how to do it. But I think they'd reached a bit of a crisis point, because, as I've already said, they were hit by the pandemic particularly hard. They were still having to send students out on placements. They were still having to teach students in person, because you can't teach a nurse how to do blood pressure online, etc. And so they've been really hard hit. And then within the University of Nottingham, we also do an engagement score every 2 years, and it's an external company that come and do it. And in 2019, so before the pandemic had even hit, their engagement survey had shown that the staff engagement was really low. So there was like a perfect storm of a pandemic, a meaty problem that they've been trying to solve for a long time, and actually their staff are really quite have low engagement levels. And because they were triplicating these roles at best, they didn't have enough time to do the value-adding activities that they wanted to be able to do. So just to show you what that looked like, this is just a table that shows you how many hours they were spending not on teaching or research. So these are academics who are doing in the kind of the administrative and leadership roles that all academics tend to do within universities, and then how many hours per student that was taken by division. as well. So you can see here that the nursing number of hours was 11,000 and a bit, but they had a lot more students, but actually the amount of time each one of those students actually got was a lot lower than both midwifery and physiotherapy, and actually physiotherapy were almost blessed with time. And then there were some roles that were operating at a school level as well. And that's the fourth row down. And again, that was actually relatively low, but a really significant amount of time annually that people were spending on these administrative leadership roles. And what the head of school and deputy head of school wanted was to try and reduce that time down so it could be spent on teaching, research, etc. So when you actually started looking at the roles, there were some that were glaringly obvious as to, well, that's a bit bonkers. So I've highlighted 4 there in blue. So there were 21 school investigating officers. So they are the people who do fitness to practice investigations. And I don't know why there were 21. They didn't know why there were 21. But in total, that was taking 525 hours. So actually a relatively small number of hours per person, but still a fairly big chunk. But a couple of them really jump out. So admissions tutor, 5 of those. So there was 1 per division, apart from in nursing, because there was 2 in nursing, and then there was a school role admissions tutor as well. So there were 5 in total. And that's over 2,000 hours a year spent on doing that role. And you can see some of the other examples as well. And I actually haven't got a slide that shows this, but I cut this both ways. So this was how much time by role. I also flipped it and just showed how many hours. And I presented this back to the head of school, and I think it's fair to say that she was really surprised. I think a little bit embarrassed because she probably should have known this already. And I think it gave her the impetus to go, yeah, we need to do something about this. So we had a rapid improvement then. And these were the 2 objectives that they wanted. So to take a 1 school approach, so no more divisions, but it's really important to people who work in this school that they retain that professional identity. So they still want to feel like a nurse or a midwife or a physiotherapist, but it needed to be across the school. And then the second objective was all around creating clear line management structures. So one of the other things they would tell me is that they didn't know who to go to for help or staff development. So that was me, the head of school and the deputy head of school, having that conversation and coming out with these objectives. But then we needed some people to actually do it, do the rapid improvement event. And so we put together a little video, which I'm going to play, hopefully it works for you all, just to try and generate some interest. So I'm going to click on play. for you, but you could have read the words even without the dingly music. So a couple of key things from that. So it worked. We got a lot of interest. The team that was assembled, like the Avengers, was heavily academic led. Amy, who's on, her name's on there, she's the deputy head of school and one of the professors in the school. She was our team leader. And then the head of school was the sponsor. And as it said in there, we did it over 3 days. It was all online, which was really, really intense. And I'm very much looking forward to being able to do these in person. And they came up with all of the changes that we did. So just to give you an idea of some of the things that we did during the 3 days. Okay, well, we didn't need to listen to that again. So number one, the first thing we did was some vision setting. So we tried to create a shared vision with within the team. So this is our kind of visual that we use for our kata model. But we stuck just to the vision, trying to really get that kind of cohesive view of what they wanted this new school structure to look like. We did some Ishikawa, so a bit of root cause analysis of the problem. That's not a real one on the screen at the moment. Once they come up with their ideas, we did a nice SWOT analysis, so which of the options might be best. And then we did some future state modelling. So what does that actually look like as well? So they were some of the tools that we used, pretty standard, I'm sure you've all come across those before. But what was the outcome? So they came up with this as their new structure, which probably doesn't make any sense to any one of you. And if I was looking at it, it probably wouldn't make sense to me either. But the reason I like this diagram first and foremost is that they put the customer in the middle. So the end user, the student, but because these were nurses, etc., they also felt like the patients were also should be right there in the centre. And instead of having divisions, they came up with this triangle of people, ESE, and research, and then off to the right-hand side, they had their kind of their administrative support or operational support. But just to show you what it looks like in what I think is a slightly more sensible way, is they drew all of this during the event. And I would say they did it. I didn't do it. I wasn't there, tapping away. They did this stuff themselves. So they came out with these within the people side, these professional groups. So that's in that purple box, and they were designed to get there to retain that professional identity, but also to help with the line management structures. Then they have their teaching bit, so that bit in the middle. So they are the different courses that we run. And then on the right hand side, we've got the research. So that's the research centres or groups that we had. So they did all this. They were very pleased with themselves. As an example, the 3,528, that is hours saved. So by creating that one professional lead role, which came out of those three different roles on the right hand side, they calculated that there would be saving about 3,500 hours a year. So quite a big saving, and that's just one of the examples. There were others, but only got a limited amount of time to show you everything. But for me, that was great for them. But for me, there were other outcomes as well that I noted. So I've got a slide in a minute which touches on their engagement, but their staff engagement across all of the questions that we ask rose. So everyone in that school, on average, not anyway, not everyone, but on average, people were happier. They also found an academic, and again, it's an academic. I think this is quite unusual within HE, certainly in my experience, but they found an academic to work on improvement projects. And I talk to that academic once a week. I coach her, I talk to her about the things that she's doing, and actually I've just managed to gently encourage her to go on to our green belt course. So she's currently going through that as well. They're also talking to us all the time about how to standardise, how to bring other standardisation. And I'm doing quite a big piece of work with one of their teams, which is called Phillmore, which is all about online learning, about how they work. But for me, the bottom two were really, really positive. So I'm currently in this programme of training with their senior academic leaders. I was doing it just not yesterday, the day before. And so we've done Hoshin Canry, we've done some workshops, and now we're getting onto the leader standard work. So I'm doing a whole raft. I've got 5 cohorts of academics going through what we're calling lean leadership. And something that the head of school declared just the other day was that I'm really pleased about is we need to deliver our strategy, and we're going to do it using lean. And that is a really big win for us here at the university. Okay, so just to highlight the point about the engagement scores. So the bar on the left was the question 2019. The bar on the right is the question 2021. And you can see across the board, so I think there's 12 questions, there was a rise. And I mean, just obviously there were probably other things going on as well, but I have no doubt that the work that we've been doing with the school has been a big part of that. So that's case study 1. On to case study 2. So that, as I said earlier, that led directly in to being able to say, oh, we should do rapid improvement events in other areas. And I was already heavily involved in a university-wide improvement initiative on the PGR journey. So, you know, everything to do with PGR. We're currently on to phase 4, so I've got a scoping meeting in a couple of weeks to look at supervision. But the very first thing we looked at was inquiries and admissions. And all of this work is being sponsored by our Deputy Vice-Chancellor, so the second most senior person within the university. They're being led by our Associate Pro-Vice-Chancellor for the Research Academy. She's called Lucy, Professor Donaldson, and she is absolutely fantastic and a real lean advocate for us. So, what was the problem? There was a central team who were responsible for all aspects of inquiry all the way through to a PGR turning up to register. And that's what sits within our inquiries and admissions department. But because of the nature of these types of applications, they go through to academics to actually determine whether or not we're going to offer them a place. And it would be any academic, or it is any academic, depending on the research speciality of that person and what that PhD or potential PhD student wants to do. So a really wide range of people. It's not like in our taught processes where each school has an admissions tutor and they basically manage it themselves. It could be anyone within that school. Make it slightly more complicated. Each doctoral training partnership, so we have a lot of we call them DTPs, sometimes you might call them CDTs or DTCs, but basically it's where it might be a delivery of some PhD research which is in collaboration with another university, or across multiple schools within the university, and they were almost their own self-contained units, and so they were all operating their own processes as well. And this particular area within the university was highlighted as being important from various different reviews. You can see on there, there were lots of different things, but also we did some voice of the customer exercises with PGRs, and it came out quite strongly there as well. Now, this was different to health sciences because this was the entire university. So we have 5 faculties, we have, I think it's 21 schools, and we have around 20 doctoral training partnerships, and we needed participation across the board for this to be a success, because if we just got a bunch of engineers in the room and they decided how we were going to do inquiries and admissions, you can bet your bottom dollar that the Faculty of Science would say, well, we're not doing it like that. So that's where we leveraged our team leader, Lucy, who I've already mentioned, because she's got contacts across the piece, and she was sending out information and requests for support. We had an online form for people to fill in and say they wanted to be part of it. And again, we ended up with a big academic representation. So actually more than 50% of the people who came to this rapid improvement event were academics. We did have some, we call them APM here, so administrative, professional and managerial colleagues as well. And then the graph on the right just shows you where they came from. So every department and every faculty were represented. And actually, when you when I look at the who came from where, it's kind of in line with how many people are in those schools or faculties as well. So we do a lot of research in science and medicine and health sciences, and that's where we got high representation. There's less people in arts, so you would expect there to be less people coming to something like this as well. Okay. So before we got into the rapid improvement event, I spent a really, really long time talking to the directors of PGR in all of the different schools to understand what their processes were. And I created off the back of those some really detailed process maps. But fundamentally, as I was talking to people, we ended up going, well, hang on, there's just 4 processes here. There is variation within those 4, but fundamentally there's 4. And I know there's only 3 on the screen. I'm going to show you the 4th in a minute. So the first one was that the inquirer would inquire directly through to the school. They would then just be told apply. They would apply through My Nottingham, which is our online portal, and then those applications would get passed to the school for them to decide what to do, and then the school would pass the decision back to admissions. So that's process 1. Process 2, slightly different. Instead of inquiring to the school, they would inquire to admissions directly. Then they would pass it on to a school. Then there would be this kind of conversation between the school and the inquirer. And then if the school thought, yeah, there's something in this, then they would ask them to apply, and then so on. And then the final one was that most of the the applicants or the inquirer would inquire direct to the school, and then most of the application process would happen off system and informally between that person and the potential supervisor, and then they would go, yeah, we want you, we really want you, now can you go and apply please? And then they would have to go through the process, like the formal process. That was really tricky because what admissions do right at the start is filter out anyone who's never going to be eligible, and it was kind of bypassing that check. So that's process number 3. And then we had our DTP process, which basically meant that there was 2 parallel processes. So these people have to apply to their DTP, but they still had to apply to the university. And when it goes through the DTP, they did it in various different ways. Some of them had online forms, some of them paper forms, but loads of different ways. And then they would be asked to apply through the University of Nottingham as well. And what our voice of the customer told us was this was really irritating, because you get to the point of thinking that you'd applied, and then you'd be told, no, actually you have to apply again. So what this told me was that we had, clearly there was going to be waste in there, and clearly there was going to be overburden, but really the big problem here was that there was no standard. And I don't know about anyone else, but when I work with anyone pretty much, what I normally find first and foremost is there is no standard. And so that really became the focus of the rapid improvement event. It was, let's get a standard process for how we do inquiries and admissions. So, as well as doing all of that process mapping work, I also did some voice of the customer work and voice of the university work. And we did focus groups with our PGRs, and when I put overwhelming, and I can't stress how overwhelming it was, what they wanted, what an inquirer or an applicant wanted, was interaction with an academic really early on in the process to create a meeting of minds, to understand that they want to work with each other. And actually this came from both our PGRs, but also came from our academics as well. And I'm sure you know that doing a PhD, it's not like doing a talk course. It's quite an intense relationship between the PhD student and the supervisor or supervisors. And so it's really important to get that early meeting of minds. Now, that's difficult to do in a process. And so that became our challenge. So how do we do that without making our new standard process that we're going to want to create unworkable? So we held our rapid improvement event. We had 3 objectives to try and get rid of that waste. So we don't want any of that non-value adding activities. You know, we can try and get rid of some of that. Number 2, get that standard process. Recognise that there's some variation, but only when it's legitimate. And then 3, recognise and build into process university-wide requirements. So there was a lot of concern when we did the voice of the university around our ability to report on EDI, data protection, things like that. So we needed to make sure that was in there as well. Now, sure, this isn't unusual for colleagues on the session, but inevitably, when we do anything like this, systems are discussed and talked about, and actually, oh, if we just had a system, everything would be better. We explicitly made it clear that we weren't looking at any systems development. It was out of scope. We're not interested, and that was a conscious decision to focus on the process and get what we want the process to be first, and then later down the line we can then worry about, oh, how do we actually systemize this? And I remember one of the conversations I had during the rapid improvement event, where we kind of got into a bit of systems discussion, and I said to someone, I was like, well, what aspects of this new process that you're all talking about could you do without a system? And someone went, well, I'm sure you know, Luke, we could do it all without a system. And that was a bit of a breakthrough, really, because there was a recognition there then that we could actually get on with it and implement the new process. 2 other things out of scope. So population. So we weren't looking to increase or decrease our numbers, and we weren't looking to increase or decrease how much we were funding our PGRs. That wasn't the purpose of this particular exercise. There's other work going on in that area. So what did we do? We did this one over 4 days. We did some benefit exploration, so getting the academics and the administrators on the call to agree and identify what those benefits of doing the changes might be. We did some CTQs, so we'd done all the voice of the customer, but we then actually got them to build a CTQ tree. We did a Phillmore, that was fun, so where could it go wrong? And then finally, we did a future state process map. And again, this one was all online, all through Teams. We used whiteboard quite a bit. I know you can't see that, but that's kind of a representation of the complexity that we were getting to. I actually did another rapid improvement event in, I think it was May or June this year, and we used whiteboard for that. And at one point I said, right, it's time to generate some ideas, and they came out with 98. I was like, oh, I mean, that was just great, really, really good. So what was the outcome for this one? We had a new standard process that everyone agreed, because our Deputy Vice-Chancellor was sponsoring it when we did the report out, he was like, yeah, great, this is what we're going to be doing. It's taking a little time to embed, as all these things do, but we had an agreement on a new process. And if you think back just a couple of minutes ago to what I was saying, our PGRs wanted that value-adding time, and we pushed that right to the start of the process. So we've got a new way of aligning supervisors to inquirers so they can develop that kind of theme of research. And we did that by improving this column here, which is all around how we made decisions. And we use a system here called Campus Solutions, and academics were perfectly able to log into Campus Solutions and assess an application, and yet none of them did. And instead, admissions would send them PDFs, or they would put them on SharePoint, etc. And so we're moving away from doing that. Academics will go in, look at the decisions themselves, which meant that our admissions colleagues have that time to then do the supervisor alignment earlier on instead. Okay, so that was the main two improvements. This work's actually going on. We're expecting nearly everything to be in place by November this year, which will mean we won't have lost a cycle either of PGR applicants, which is really positive. And again, though, there were secondary outcomes. So, so number one, they widened the opinions of people within the university, senior people, around using rapid improvement events. So, like I said, our Deputy Vice-Chancellor was a sponsor. We then went on to do 2 more with PGR. I've got a colleague who's doing one this Friday. We had another colleague who did one a couple of weeks back, and which is actually with some external people as well, because it was a doctoral training program that involved, I think it was 5 universities. As I said, a further rapid improvement event was asked for immediately to do progression, PGR progression, and that was also a success. And from a getting in shape, from my perspective, it was a really good opportunity to promote what we do and how it can help. So, like I said, we're getting requests to do this type of work. I would say we're also now, this obviously it's all been about rapid improvement events. I would say it's had a much wider impact for us, in that we are seen as a team who get things done, who can help people solve problems. This is one of the things that we can do, but it's not the only thing. And that's been really, really positive. And then I'm nearly done, and I'm going to ask Susan to put you into breakout rooms, but I'll just to blow my own trumpet slightly, because why not? The feedback we received from the rapid improvement events was also another indicator of how successful they've been. So you can see the reason that only excellent and good are on the chart is because no one rated either event as anything other than excellent or good. So that was obviously a nice positive. And thinking about being at a university, that's a first class degree on both counts. So I'm happy with that. And then some of the feedback we received from some of the typed in feedback as well. So really, really successful. Okay, so I'm going to ask Susan to put you into little breakout rooms. We've got, so I've got 15. Okay, now is everyone back? I don't know how I'm supposed to know whether everyone's back, but I'm going to assume that we are. Could I just ask that if you could put into the chat anything that you've just discussed around different areas that you might benefit from an RIE, or anything else that that came up in your discussion. I mainly want to just get a chance to meet someone else while we're here. Okay, so just to finish off, and then I'll take any questions. So a couple of top tips. So get your sponsor and team leader right. So the team leader needs to be someone who has some operational authority over the process or the area that you're looking at. Your sponsor needs to be someone who can make a decision, which is why for the PGR work we had to go right up to the Deputy Vice Chancellor. Plant the idea early. So I'm doing another piece of work at the moment, a much smaller piece of work with a much smaller group, but I've already started going, well, maybe you should do an RIE, that might work for this. And they're like, unless they've already been through one before, they're almost certainly going to be hesitant. So plant the idea early, let them get used to it. Make sure that you've got the understanding of the current state right. So you don't want to go into one of these and then find out that people in the room have a different opinion or have brought new information that you didn't know about. So you want to make sure that you've got that current state correct. Get the right people, preferably willing. Don't want to kind of frog march anyone in there. We haven't had to do that yet. But also people who are going to be enthusiastic and I suppose as we've heard this morning, not mood hoovers or people who've got a face like a burst sofa, etc. So we want the right people. Although I would say I have seen people flip during the course of a rapid improvement event from being a bit of a mood hoover to being really quite a strong advocate of the changes that we want to make. Make sure that you have a compelling case for change. So the data that I gathered for the first rapid improvement event was essential to make sure that everyone agreed that this was a problem worth tackling. And then finally, follow the 6 rapid improvement event rules, which are these on the screen right now. So number 1, as always, we want to respect others. So it needs to be a safe environment that people can air their views. But we also need people to tell the truth. So changes need to be based on data. We use, you might have heard it, but we use an acronym here called FOG, which is it a fact, an opinion, or a guess? And we want the facts. So we want to clear the fog with our facts. Everyone needs to contribute. So we had both times we had people who got stuck in and they did stuff. It wasn't me just doing stuff all the time. We need people to be open-minded. They need to have a go. Instead of saying no, say, let's have a go. Let's go through that PDCA cycle. Be annoying and always ask why. Make sure that you're not assuming anything. And then finally, be safe and think safe. So we can't be doing something like this and not be safe. We need to be cautious but bold. And the worst thing that would happen is if you did something like this and then it didn't work, it was perceived as a failure. So we need to think safe and be safe. And that is my last slide, and I'm happy to take any questions. And I'll stop sharing my screen. I can see people again. Hello, everyone.